Hello and welcome back to Veil Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy drifting into dark, chilling tales, veiled in noir, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare. Relax your mind. Let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1. I walked across the burning concrete of the water park, and it felt like the heat was pressing down on my chest. The air smelled like sunscreen, chlorine, and fried food. Everywhere I looked, there was noise and movement. Kids yelling, water splashing, speakers blasting music that sounded tinny and too loud. It all mixed together until it felt like one long scream. I didn't choose to be here. My mom and my little brother had dragged me along like I didn't have a say. They loved places like this: slides, wave pools, lazy rivers, anything with water and crowds. I never understood it. If I could have stayed home, I would have. I would have stayed in my room with my door closed, the way I liked it, with my laptop and my own quiet. But I was stuck with them today because my mom had finally decided she was tired of me avoiding her. I'd been hiding behind summer classes and homework, acting like every assignment took hours longer than it really did. It worked for a while. It always worked for a while. Then, 3 weeks before school started, she snapped. "School starts soon, and you haven't done one thing with us all summer," she'd said, loud enough to make it feel like she was performing for an invisible audience. I hadn't even looked away from my screen. I just kept staring, hoping she'd get tired and walk away. She didn't. In the end, I gave in because fighting her was worse than agreeing. That was how it always went. If I pushed back, she'd turn it into a whole drama about family and gratitude, and how she only wanted one day together. If I stayed silent, she'd guilt me until it felt easier to just say yes. Now I was paying for it. I kept thinking I should have chosen something else, something smaller. I should have gone to one of my brother's baseball games, sat in the sun for an hour, clapped when I was supposed to, and then gone home. That would have been boring, but it would have been manageable. Instead, I was at a water park, and my family wasn't the type to leave early. We didn't have season passes. When my mom bought tickets, it meant we were staying until closing. An entire day. No escape. My brother bounced on his toes in front of me like he was powered by electricity. His skin was already tan, his hair drying into stiff little spikes from the chlorine. He grabbed my hand and pulled hard like he was worried I might slip away into the crowd. "Bubba!" he shouted, using that nickname he'd had for me since he could talk. "Come on, let's go on that one next." He pointed up at a huge slide structure made of metal beams and bright plastic tubes. 2 enclosed slides twisted around each other from the top, like some kind of double helix. The tubes wrapped and crossed and dropped so steeply that, from where I stood, they looked less like a ride and more like a trap. Not a chance, I thought. Not a chance, I muttered out loud, hoping my brother wouldn't hear me over the noise. He heard me anyway. Kids always did. They had that talent, hearing what you didn't want them to hear. My mom, sitting in a lawn chair under a faded umbrella, looked up from her phone like she'd been waiting for the moment to jump in. "You go with him," she said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. like I was her built-in assistant, like I owed her. I stared at her. For a second, I wanted to tell her no. I wanted to tell her I didn't even want to be here, that this whole day was for her and my brother, not me. But she held my gaze calm and stubborn, and I felt that familiar squeeze in my stomach. The feeling that no matter what I said, she would win. Her eyes dropped first, just barely, like she didn't care enough to keep fighting me with eye contact. That somehow made it worse. I lowered my head, anger buzzing under my skin, and got up from the chair so fast it scraped the concrete. My brother cheered like he'd just been handed a prize and followed me without a second thought. As we walked, I couldn't stop thinking about my mom, about how different she used to be. Before my stepdad, she worked all the time. She had been tired in a real way, the kind that made you fall asleep with your shoes still on. Then she married him, and everything changed. The house got bigger. Her clothes got nicer. The things she complained about became smaller and smaller, like she had to invent problems to fill the space. Now her hardest job was driving my brother to practices and games and dealing with my stepdad when he came home angry for no reason. He was successful, sure. A big law firm, money, a clean suit, a nice car. But he carried his bitterness around like it was part of his body, like it belonged to him. And somehow in that house, I was always the one in the wrong. We reached the base of the slide stairs, and I looked up. The steps were narrow and steep, crowded with dripping kids and impatient parents. The metal rails were hot from the sun. I hadn't even gotten into the water once, not all day. My brother turned and looked me over, confused like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Why haven't you been swimming?" he asked loud and squeaky. I looked down at myself. I was dry, except for sweat. My shoulders and arms were turning pink, then red, and the burn was already deep enough that even moving hurt. My mom had kept chasing me earlier with sunscreen, rubbing it on like she was trying to erase me. It didn't help. My skin was pale and thin, and the sun always won. "What's the point?" I said. He wrinkled his face like I'd spoken another language. The expression made him look more like an animal than a person, the way he always did when he didn't understand something. My brother had my face, same eyes, same shape of mouth, but none of my thoughts, none of the part of me that stayed quiet and watched everything. "What do you mean?" "It's fun," he said. "Coach Daniel says it's great exercise even if it doesn't help me throw." I didn't answer. I didn't have the energy to explain myself, and even if I did, he wouldn't get it. I just started climbing. My brother took the stairs 2 at a time, like gravity didn't apply to him. He grinned the whole way up, looking back every few steps to make sure I was still there. I followed behind, slower, my chest tightening with every step. Halfway up, my breathing started to sound too loud in my own ears, like it was echoing inside my skull. Sweat ran down my back and into the sunburned skin, and the sting made me grit my teeth. The metal steps were wet and slippery, and the whole structure shook every time someone moved. I gripped the rail, and the heat from it pressed into my palm. When we got near the top, I could see the launch area. 2 open slide entrances side by side, both dark inside, both with water pouring in. They looked like mouths, like they were waiting. My brother reached the front and started bouncing in place, almost vibrating with excitement. There was no line in front of him, but there were people behind us. and I could feel their impatience like a physical thing. It made my shoulders tense. A lifeguard stood there with a whistle around his neck and sunglasses that hid his eyes. He looked bored, like he'd seen too much screaming and splashing to care anymore. His skin was tan, almost golden, and he had that look some adults get when they think kids are just annoying problems they have to manage. He glanced at my brother, then at me, then back at my brother. His mouth tightened, just a little. An expression like hurry up. Something ugly rose in me. It surprised me how fast it happened. One second I was tired and irritated, and the next I felt this sharp, hot resentment toward him, just because of the look on his face. I stared at the lifeguard, and my mind drifted into a place I didn't want it to go. I imagined him losing his balance. I imagined putting my hand on his back and pushing, just once, hard. The metal railing wouldn't stop him. He'd tip over and drop down to the concrete far below. The thought was so clear it made my stomach twist. Over what? I told myself. Over a look? Over nothing? But the image stayed, hanging there like a shadow I couldn't shake. I was so locked into it that I didn't even notice the lifeguard move closer until he spoke. "Are you going down too?" he asked. His voice snapped me back. I blinked and realized he was just a few feet away, waiting for an answer like I was holding up his whole day. Yeah, I said. And even to me it sounded weak. He nodded toward the slide entrances, firm and impatient, like he didn't care what I wanted, like my hesitation was just another problem. My brother sat down at the edge of one tube immediately, legs stretched out in front of him. He looked back at me with wide eyes and that same huge grin. "Come on, Bubba," he said. "It won't be that scary." I stepped closer, and the sound from inside the slide hit me. The roar of water rushing through a tight space. The tube was pink and orange, bright on the outside, but inside it was just a dark tunnel. The water disappeared into it like it was being swallowed. I hesitated, and I could feel the people behind us shifting, annoyed. The lifeguard sighed, loud enough for me to hear. "Now or never, kid," he said, and his hand pressed against my back. Just a little push. Not enough to hurt someone normally. But my back was sunburned and the contact felt like fire. Pain flashed across my skin, sudden and sharp, and my body reacted before my mind caught up. I stepped forward fast, almost stumbling. "Stop being a scaredy cat," my brother yelled, laughing like it was a game. I grabbed the bar above the entrance and leaned in. The water jets inside pulled at my leg the moment I put it in, like the slide itself had hands. It tugged, eager, impatient. My brother started counting, loud and proud. "Okay, on 3. 1, 2, 3. He let go and vanished into the darkness without a second thought, swallowed up like he'd never existed. I didn't move. For a moment, I pulled my leg back out. I thought, I can still stop. I can still step away. I can still say I can't do it. Then a shove hit my back harder than the first one. And before I could turn around, the slide pulled me in. The world flipped. At first, it was the change in gravity, the sudden drop that made my stomach jump up into my throat. My body went weightless for a split second, and then the tube threw me into a sharp turn. Water slapped my face, and I tried to gasp, but my breath caught at the wrong time. I sucked in water. It burned going down, cold and chemical, and my lungs panicked. I coughed, but coughing inside a rushing tube didn't help. It just made more water get in. The noise was constant, Water roaring, plastic vibrating, my own choking sound swallowed up by the tunnel. I told myself it would be over quickly. That was the whole point of these rides, right? A few seconds of fear, then it ends. You hit the pool at the bottom, you laugh, you move on. But it didn't end. I kept sliding and turning and dropping over and over. The tube was dark except for quick flashes of light where the sun leaked through thin plastic. Pink, yellow, orange, pink again, like the inside of some huge living thing. The water stopped feeling refreshing. It started to feel violent. It hit my skin hard enough to sting, and the friction against my back and arms began to rub raw, especially where the sunburn was worst. My throat felt tight. Every time I tried to breathe, I got a little air and a lot of water. My vision started to narrow, the edges dimming. This is taking too long, I thought. And then the thought turned into something worse. What if it doesn't stop? I tried to count seconds, to give myself a way to measure time, but I couldn't focus. The ride kept throwing me around, twisting my body, forcing me into turns I couldn't prepare for. My head hit the side once, not hard enough to knock me out, but enough to make stars burst behind my eyes. I coughed again, and my chest cramped like it was trying to fold in on itself. For the first time, I thought, I could actually die here. Not in a dramatic way, not with anyone noticing right away. Just trapped in this tube, filling up with water, panicking until my body gave up. But death didn't come. The slide kept going and going and going. It felt impossible. No ride could be this long. No structure could hold a tunnel that endless. The water changed. I don't know how else to explain it. It started warm, then hotter, like it was being heated somewhere deep inside the ride. The air in the tube felt thick, and the darkness felt heavier, like it wasn't just the absence of light. It felt like something pressing in on me. I tried to scream, but the sound turned into another choking cough. When I finally did manage to let out a real scream, it ripped out of me like it didn't belong to me, like some other part of me had taken over. The scream echoed strangely, like it didn't just bounce off the plastic near me. It felt like it traveled, like it went up and down the tunnel, far beyond where I was. The idea hit me so suddenly it almost made me forget to breathe. I'm trapped here. Not, this is scary. Not, I want it to be over. Not even, this is unsafe. Trapped. Like the slide had closed behind me, like it had chosen me. Then another thought pushed its way in, ugly and sharp. Is my brother going through this too? The answer didn't come, and the not knowing made something bitter twist inside me. If he wasn't suffering like this, why should I be the only one? Why should he get to fly through life smiling while I rot in my room, silent and ignored? Why should he get all the attention, all the pride, all the normal moments, while I stayed invisible, unless someone needed something from me? That bitterness grew until it started to feel like a voice of its own. Then I heard something, close to my ear, like a whisper made out of water. Whose fault is that? I jerked, but the tube held me tight, the water forcing me forward. What? I thought. What kind of question is that? The whisper came again, smooth and cold. Who decided that? My mind flashed with images. My stepdad's face when he was angry. My mom's voice when she was disappointed. My brother getting praised for every small thing. My own door closed, my room dim. The glow of my screen reflecting in my eyes like a second world I lived in because the real one didn't fit. It doesn't matter, I tried to say, but it came out as a wet cough. It doesn't change anything. The whisper didn't sound impressed. You don't know how wrong you are. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. I tried to shake my head, but the water pinned me in place. What are you talking about, I thought, and for a moment I wasn't sure if I was thinking it or hearing it. There is not a single person who could save me. I told the darkness, the water, the voice, whatever it was. No one helped before. No one is coming now. The whisper slid right through my words, calm as a tide. No one can save you. That should have made me feel worse. It should have crushed whatever hope I had left. But it didn't stop there. But who does that leave? The question landed hard and time seemed to pause around it. The rushing water was still there, but for a moment it felt far away, like I was floating in a quiet space, inside my own head. Who does that leave? I wanted to say no one. I wanted to say I couldn't. I wanted to say it wasn't fair. But another answer rose up, quieter and more frightening because it felt true. Me. I felt my throat tighten, not from water this time, but from something like understanding. Then the whisper came again, almost gentle. Not quite, but alone to accept help. Before I could even decide what that meant, the slide shifted. The falling sensation returned, sudden and sharp, and I shot forward into what felt like a straight section. Water blasted into my face so hard it made my nose sting. The speed dropped quickly, like the ride had slammed on invisible brakes. And then, without warning, the darkness opened into blinding light. I shot out into a shallow run-out lane and crashed into the pool at the bottom, water exploding around me. My body slid to a stop. For a second, I just lay there, stunned, my lungs dragging in air like they'd forgotten how to work. The sun above me was so bright it hurt. The normal sounds of the park came rushing back, laughing, shouting, whistles, music. It all felt wrong, like I'd returned to a place that shouldn't exist. I blinked water out of my eyes and saw my brother running toward me, grinning like nothing had happened, like the ride had been exactly what it was supposed to be. "Bubba," he shouted. "Come on, let's go again. That was so much fun." I stared up at him. My face was wet, and nobody would notice the difference between water from the slide and water from my eyes. A tear slid down anyway, mixing in with everything else. Invisible. My chest still felt tight, like something had wrapped around it and hadn't let go. The memory of the whisper clung to me in a way I couldn't explain. I couldn't tell if it had been real or if my brain had made it up in panic, but I could still hear it faintly, like it was waiting, alone to accept help. I swallowed, forced my mouth into something that looked like a smile, and pushed myself up on shaking arms. "Yeah," I said, my voice rough. "Let's go." Story 2. I didn't realize something was wrong until my toothbrush changed color. That still sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud. If I told anyone at work, they'd laugh and say, I must have grabbed the wrong one half asleep. If I told my brother, he'd start asking if I'd been sleeping enough, if I'd been eating, if I'd been drinking. Everyone would have a normal explanation ready. Because a toothbrush is such a small thing. It doesn't feel like a doorway into anything. It doesn't feel like proof. But it was the first time I stopped and thought, no, that isn't possible. Not in my apartment. Not in my life. Not with the way I remember it. Looking back, the toothbrush wasn't even close to the first sign. It was just the first sign that finally made my brain slow down long enough to notice the pattern. There had been other things, little things I brushed off as forgetfulness or the weird drift of life after you lose someone. A couple of forks in the drawer that I didn't remember buying. A different paper towel brand under the sink. The kind she liked, but I never bought because it cost more. A jar of peanut butter in the pantry that I could have sworn wasn't there the week before. Small stuff that didn't feel worth writing down. Small stuff that didn't feel like it could mean anything. And honestly, the toothbrush wasn't much bigger than any of those. It's strange that it was the one that did it. Maybe it was because it hit something personal. Maybe it was because I could trace my memory around it so clearly. Like my fingers could still feel the plastic through the packaging, and I could still remember exactly where I put it. 3 months after she died, I went to the grocery store and I saw a 2-pack of toothbrushes hanging on a rack by the pharmacy aisle. One was red and one was blue. They weren't fancy, just 2 basic brushes, but the colors were perfect. Red was her favorite. Blue was mine. When we were together, we had this dumb little game. If we came across something that came in both of our favorite colors, 2 mugs, a pair of towels, matching water bottles, we bought it, even if we didn't really need it. It wasn't about the thing. It was about the tiny feeling of being a team in a world that didn't care. We'd hold the items up, point at ours, and grin like kids. When I saw the toothbrushes, I stood there longer than I should have. I told myself it was stupid. I told myself I didn't need them. But my hand still reached out. I bought them and brought them home like I was following a rule that existed outside of time. That night I opened the pack in the bathroom. I remember it clearly because I hesitated. I pulled out the blue toothbrush first. I left the red one sealed in the plastic. I wasn't ready for red in my mouth. Not yet. I wasn't ready to stand in front of the mirror and have her color in my hand twice a day like nothing had happened. Blue felt safe. Blue felt like mine. I told myself I'd use the blue one until it wore out, and then when I was ready, I'd switch. I'd face the red when I could handle it. For several days, I used the blue toothbrush. I remember the feel of it, new bristles, that slight stiffness, the way it made my gums a little sore at first. I'm not imagining that. I know I'm not. Then one morning I walked into the bathroom, still half asleep, and the toothbrush in the holder was red. I stopped in the doorway like I'd walked into the wrong apartment. For a long time, I just stared at it. The red handle, the exact shape, the same cheap plastic, the same angled neck, sitting where the blue one should have been, like it belonged there, like it had always been there. My first thought was that I'd done it without thinking. I tried to picture myself stumbling in during the night, grabbing the wrong brush, swapping them, putting the blue one away. It was a weak explanation, but it was the kind of explanation you reach for when you don't want to accept anything else. Still staring, I opened the drawer under the sink. The blue toothbrush was there. Not in the holder, not damp, not used, not tossed loosely like something grabbed in a hurry. It was still on the unopened side of the original package, sealed and perfect, as if nobody had ever touched it. Like I had never pulled it out at all. Meanwhile, the red toothbrush in the holder had bent bristles, the kind that only happen after a few uses. Not a lot, but enough. Enough to show it had been in someone's mouth. Enough to show it had done those first few new toothbrush mornings. My hands went cold. I stood there with the drawer open, staring at the two of them like they were pieces on a board and I'd missed a move. I tried to force the simplest answer. I must have misremembered. I must have used the red one first. I must have imagined the blue one. Except I could see the blue one sealed in plastic, like a receipt from reality. And I could feel deep in my body that I'd been using blue. It wasn't a vague memory. It was like remembering which hand you write with. I didn't have time to solve it. I was already running late for work. I closed the drawer, tried not to look at the toothbrush holder again, and went through the rest of my morning like a person pretending not to hear a strange noise in the house. For the next couple weeks, I did my best not to think about it. I'd see the red toothbrush every time I washed my hands, every time I leaned toward the mirror, every time I passed the sink, and I'd feel that same tightness behind my ribs. I even thought about throwing it away and using the blue one like I'd planned, but I couldn't make myself do it. It's hard to explain why. It wasn't superstition exactly. It was more like fear of making the situation real, fear of touching the edge of something that didn't follow rules. The red toothbrush felt like a sign I didn't understand, and I didn't want to respond wrong. So I left it alone. Over time, my mind did what minds do when they need to keep functioning. It pushed it down. I told myself grief makes you weird. I told myself my brain was still broken, and it would settle. Then the bedsheets changed. It happened late at night after a long day, the kind where your body is on autopilot, and you're already thinking about the shape of sleep. I did my routine. Lock the door, wash my face, check my phone, turn off the lights. Snowball, my white Persian cat, followed me like he always did, silent and fluffy and demanding in his own way. I walked into the bedroom, went to my side of the bed, and pulled back the covers. The sheets were red flannel. Not my sheets. Not anything I'd ever bought. Thick, soft-looking. The kind that holds heat. A deep red with a pattern so faint it almost looked solid in the dim light. My tiredness vanished so fast it felt like someone poured cold water down my spine. I stepped back without meaning to. I stood there staring like the bed had turned into a stranger. I only owned one set of sheets. Plain gray, matching pillowcases. I'd had another set when she was alive, but those were gone now, along with most of the pieces of her life that used to fill my closets. Neither set had ever been red flannel. I knew that with complete certainty. My first thought was an intruder. Someone had broken in, stripped my bed, put different sheets on it, and left. The idea was insane, but it was still more sane than the alternative. I live on the 6th floor of a high-rise. The only way into my unit is the front door. The hallway has a camera. My own door has a camera. I pulled up the footage with shaking hands, watching myself come and go. Work. Grocery store. Work again. Nobody else. No stranger slipping in. No maintenance. No neighbor. Just me. Still, I searched. I checked closets. I checked behind the shower curtain like a cliché. I checked the hallway outside my unit, even though I knew that made no sense. I checked places no human could fit. I checked anyway because fear makes you do stupid things and because some part of me wanted to find something, anything. a broken window, a pried lock, a sign that the world was still normal and I was just dealing with a criminal. There was nothing. Then I looked for my gray sheets. I yanked open drawers and closet doors. I pulled out laundry baskets. I checked the linen closet twice. I checked under the bed. I checked the washing machine. I checked places I knew they couldn't be, because I needed an answer and my hands had to keep moving. Snowball watched me with that blank cat curiosity, sitting in doorways and blinking slowly, like he was trying to figure out why I'd suddenly lost my mind. After more than an hour, I was sweating and lightheaded and still holding nothing but questions. I couldn't sleep in that bed. I couldn't even touch those sheets. I stood at the edge and felt my skin crawl, like the fabric was warm in a way it shouldn't be, like it was holding on to somebody else's body heat. So I went to the couch. I'd slept on the couch for weeks after she died. At first, because the bed felt too big, too empty, too loud with memories. Then because I kept telling myself I was just tired, that I'd go back tomorrow. Tomorrow became another week. I promised myself I'd never fall back into that again. That night, I didn't care. I lay down on the couch and passed out almost immediately, not because I felt safe, but because my body finally hit a limit. Snowball curled against my side like he always did when I slept out there, purring softly. A small living weight keeping me tethered to something real. In the morning, I woke with a thought already formed, like it had been sitting in the corner of my mind waiting for daylight. Those sheets were familiar. I hadn't seen them in person before, but I had seen them in a picture. 5 or 6 months earlier, before she died, we'd been shopping. She stopped at a display and picked up a set of red flannel sheets, smiling like she'd found treasure. She'd held the package to her chest and said they'd be perfect for winter. I remember teasing her, saying she'd overheat and kick them off anyway. She'd laughed and said maybe, but she wanted them. Then she looked at the price. Her face changed in that small way it always did when she was trying to be responsible. She put them back and said she'd wait for clearance. She said she'd check again later. Later never came. Sitting up on the couch with that memory hitting me, I felt something in my chest loosen and tighten at the same time. Because if those were the sheets she'd wanted, then the change wasn't random. And once I let myself think that, everything else slid into place. The forks I didn't recognize were from a set she'd wanted once, a heavier set with nicer handles. I remembered her pointing them out online and saying they'd make our kitchen look grown up. The paper towels under the sink, the expensive brand, were her brand. The peanut butter in the pantry was the kind she loved, the kind with the specific label and the texture she insisted tasted right. The shower head setting I kept finding wasn't an accident. She liked a wider spray, like rain. I liked a stronger stream. The dial was always starting on her setting, even though I'd changed it back before. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the coffee maker, and I realized my apartment had been slowly becoming a version of itself that belonged to her. There were only 2 explanations that made any sense at all. Either I was having some kind of break, doing things and forgetting, rewriting my own reality in gaps I couldn't see, or she was doing it. The first option terrified me more than anything. It meant I couldn't trust my own mind. It meant I might wake up one day and find I'd done something worse than change sheets. It meant I might not even remember. The second option was impossible, and yet it felt comforting. It felt like a hand reaching back through the dark. I hated myself for how quickly I accepted it. I didn't even fight it much. I just stood there and whispered her name like a test, like maybe the air would answer. Nothing answered, of course. But the apartment felt different after that. Not empty in the same way. That night, I went back to the bed. I told myself it was okay. I told myself if this was grief, then let it be grief. If it was her, then maybe I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. I slept under the red flannel sheets, and for the first time in months, I woke up without that familiar punch of pain in my chest. In the middle of the night, half asleep, I thought I felt her next to me. Not a body I could touch, not a real weight on the mattress, but a presence. A sense of being watched in a way that didn't feel threatening. Like being remembered. For weeks after that, the strange changes continued, and I let them. A photo on my nightstand shifted. It was still us, still smiling, still the same day, but she was wearing her favorite outfit instead of the one she'd later complained about. I sat with the picture in my hands for a long time, tracing the edges, searching for signs of tampering. The frame was sealed. The glass was clean. It made no sense. But the way she looked in that outfit, more like herself, made my throat ache. On my streaming apps, episodes of her comfort shows appeared as recently watched, the exact ones she used to put on when she was anxious, the ones she'd half watch while scrolling on her phone. Sometimes I'd come home and the continue watching bar would be sitting there like someone had been curled up on the couch while I was gone. Scents drifted through the apartment. Her lotion, her perfume. That sweet, warm smell she liked that used to cling to her hair and hoodies. The bottles were gone. I'd thrown most of them out because I couldn't handle seeing them. And still, sometimes I'd walk through the living room and it would hit me so suddenly I'd stop in place, breathing it in like a starving person. It sounds insane, but those things helped. They made the apartment feel like it wasn't just a container for my grief. They made it feel like our life hadn't been erased completely. Like something of her still had permission to exist here. For a while, I told myself it was love. I told myself she was visiting me because she missed me too. Then the tone changed. I came home from work one day and found a folded piece of notebook paper on the kitchen table. It was placed neatly, like a note left on purpose. On the outside fold, someone had written a date. At first, the date meant nothing. Then I felt my stomach drop as the memory attached itself. It was the day I'd called my brother, years ago during a rough patch with her. The day I'd admitted, quietly and ashamed, that I'd thought about ending things. I'd been angry and tired and scared of the future, and I'd said things I didn't mean. I'd confessed it like it was poison in my mouth. She'd never known about that call. I'd never told her. I'd never told anyone besides my brother. There was no reason for those words to exist anywhere else. I unfolded the paper. Written across it, in messy lines that tilted the way her writing always did, was the conversation. Not a summary, not a vague idea. Details, specific phrases, things my brother had said back to me. Things I remembered because I'd replayed that call in my head afterward, guilty and relieved at the same time. It was her handwriting. I would have recognized it on a grocery list, on a birthday card, on a sticky note stuck to the fridge. It was hers. My hand shook so hard the paper rattled. A hot wave of shame washed through me, followed by something colder. I crushed the paper into a ball and threw it into the trash like I could throw away what it meant. That night, I couldn't relax. I walked around my apartment, checking locks, checking windows, checking my phone like it might explain something. I sat at the edge of the couch and tried to breathe. I tried to tell myself again that my mind was doing this, that grief was warping me, that I'd lost track of time and objects and I was spiraling. But the handwriting wasn't something you imagine that precisely. When I finally slept, I slept on the couch again. The bed felt wrong now, like it had changed from a comfort into a stage where something was waiting for me. The next day, I tried to function. I went to work. I answered emails. I talked to coworkers. I laughed at a joke I didn't hear. All day, the paper played over in my mind like a recording. Not even the words, just the fact that the words existed. That night, I decided I couldn't avoid the bedroom forever. I went back to the bed, slid under the red flannel sheets, and waited for that sense of her presence. It wasn't there. The absence was worse than anything. In the morning, there was a notebook on the kitchen table. Same place, same neat placement. Like it had always been there, and I was late noticing it. It looked like an ordinary notebook, the kind you buy at any store. No lock, no label. When I picked it up, my fingers stuck slightly to the cover like it had been held recently. I opened it to the first page. It was her diary. I didn't even know she kept one. She never talked about it. She never left journals lying around. She was private in that way. She'd tell me her thoughts when she was ready, but she didn't like the idea of her feelings sitting somewhere for anyone to read. I should have closed it right there. I should have shoved it into a drawer and pretended I'd never seen it. I should have respected the part of her that was still hers, even in whatever this was. But it was on the table like an offering, like an invitation, like a test. I read it. I won't repeat what I saw. I can't. Even thinking about it makes my throat tighten. It wasn't sweet. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't the kind of thing you'd hope to find if you've been telling yourself the dead have come back because love doesn't end. It was raw and angry in places, scared in places, and so honest it felt like being cut open. It contained thoughts I didn't know she'd carried. It contained resentments she'd hidden behind smiles. It contained moments where she described watching me and feeling alone beside me. And the worst part wasn't even that. The worst part was the way some entries seemed to know things she couldn't have known while she was alive. Little details that didn't belong. Lines that felt like they were written from a place that wasn't time. By the time I reached the middle, my hands were damp and my heart was pounding. I closed the notebook so hard it slapped shut, and I sat there staring at it like it might move on its own. That night, I threw it in the garbage. I didn't do it gently. I didn't wrap it up or set it aside. I dumped it like it was contaminated. I took the trash out immediately, walking fast down the hallway, forcing myself not to look at the elevator mirror. I put the bag in the dumpster like I was sealing something away. Then I came back up and locked my door and stood in my kitchen breathing hard. I didn't sleep in my bed again after that. I went back to the couch and stayed there, night after night. because the bedroom felt like it belonged to something else now, and the nightmares started. At first they were just dreams where she was alive again and I couldn't reach her. Then they shifted into the day I found her, replaying in detail. Except each night it got worse. Like something was taking the memory and turning up the volume, forcing me to look longer, forcing me to notice things I hadn't noticed the first time. Each morning I woke up sweaty and shaking, with Snowball pressed against me and the taste of panic still in my mouth. The day after I found the diary, I threw away the red toothbrush too. I stood in the bathroom holding it like it was evidence. I couldn't stand the sight of it anymore. I wanted one thing in my life to go back to what I chose. I tossed the red brush into the trash and pulled out the blue one from the drawer and put it in the holder, my hands moving with stiff determination. Then I took the trash out again. I didn't want the diary or the paper or the toothbrush in my apartment for one more minute. I hauled the bag down to the dumpster and came back up, breathing hard, feeling like I'd done something brave. I went into the bathroom to wash my hands. The toothbrush in the holder was red. I stared at it until my eyes watered. I yanked open the drawer under the sink. No blue toothbrush. No packaging. Nothing. My stomach rolled like I was about to be sick. It felt like the apartment was making a point. It felt like something had smiled in the dark. After that, the changes got meaner. Photos shifted in ways that made my skin crawl. Pictures of me and her would become pictures of her with her ex-boyfriend, or of me with my ex-girlfriend. Sometimes the photos changed into impossible combinations. Her mom standing beside my second-grade teacher, my uncle with her college roommate, my old best friend from middle school next to her hairstylist. People who'd never met, smiling together in places they'd never been. Sometimes the faces were strangers, not celebrities, not stock photo smiles, but real people with real eyes, like someone had reached into the forgotten corners of our past and pulled out faces we'd once seen and then buried. The diary would show up again on the kitchen table. Every time I saw it, my chest tightened. Every time I threw it away. Sometimes it came back the next day. Sometimes it came back the same night. The showerhead always started on her setting again, even when I changed it. I'd turn the knob and feel the water hit me in that wide pattern, and rage would spike through me for no reason, sharp and immediate. I would slam it back to mine like I was fighting for territory. The scents came more often now, too strong, too thick, filling the apartment at random. Her perfume, her lotion, her shampoo, even food she liked, sweet coffee flavors, certain spices. They used to comfort me. Now they made me gag. It felt like someone pressing a memory into my face and holding it there until I couldn't breathe. Then suddenly everything stopped. 3 days passed with nothing changing. No new objects, no shifting photos, no smells, no notes, no diary. The quiet felt unreal. The first day I told myself it was a trick. The second day I started to feel cautious relief. By the third day, I let myself hope. That night I lay on the couch with Snowball purring against my leg, and I told myself that if the fourth day was quiet too, I'd go back to my bed. I'd wash the flannel sheets if I had to. I'd try to rebuild the routines I'd lost. I couldn't have known the next day would be the worst one. I came home from work drained and irritated, wanting nothing but to sit down, turn on the TV, and feel Snowball's weight on my lap. The hallway outside my unit smelled like someone's dinner. Normal. The elevator made its usual groan. Normal. My key turned in the lock. Normal. I opened the door and called, "Snowball." I heard paws on a hardwood right away, that familiar, quick skitter that always made me smile in spite of myself. But halfway through the sound, my smile faded. The footsteps were heavier than they should have been, slower, like an older cat, or a cat with a different body. The rhythm was off. The sound didn't match the animal I knew. I took a step inside, and then the cat came into view. It wasn't Snowball. It was an orange tabby, chubby and low to the ground with a face that looked permanently unimpressed. I knew him immediately, even though I'd never met him in person. I'd seen him in photos and videos she'd shown me over the years, laughing and telling stories about her childhood. The cat's name was Danger. He'd been hers when she was a kid. He'd died 2 years before I met her. And here he was, walking toward me like he'd lived here forever. For a second, my brain refused the image. It tried to correct it. It tried to make the orange fur into white fur, tried to tell me it was a trick of the light. Then the cat meowed, and the sound was wrong too. Not wrong as in supernatural. Wrong as in not Snowball's voice. The cat rushed forward, tail up, heading straight for my legs like it was coming home. A wave of dread hit me so hard I felt dizzy. I moved sideways quickly, almost tripping over my own feet to avoid letting it rub against me. I didn't know what I thought would happen if it touched me. That I'd forget Snowball existed? That I'd accept the new reality? That something would transfer? All I knew was that I couldn't let it. I hurried to the living room shelf where I kept a framed photo of Danger, an old picture she'd given me because she loved telling that story, the one where Danger knocked over a Christmas tree and then sat beside it like he'd done nothing wrong. I needed to see it. I needed the anchor. I needed proof that my mind wasn't just mixing up cats. I grabbed the frame and looked. The cat in the photo wasn't orange. It was Snowball. My hands went numb around the frame. My eyes flicked back to the tabby behind me, then back to the photo. The photo was crisp. Snowball stared back at me from inside the frame, with his flat Persian face and his white fur, like he'd always been the cat in that picture. The orange cat moved closer, trying again to press against my leg. I jumped away like it was hot. I backed into the kitchen, grabbed the treat jar with shaking hands, and popped it open. I could barely feel my fingers. I shook out a treat, and then moved quickly toward the bedroom doorway. The orange cat followed, interested and trusting, like any cat would be. I tossed the treat into the bedroom. The cat trotted after it. The moment it crossed the threshold, I slammed the bedroom door shut. The sound echoed through the apartment, too loud, too final. Right away, the cat cried on the other side. Not a normal, annoyed meow, not an angry howl, a pleading sound, long and thin, like it couldn't understand why it had been shut away. My whole body shook. I put my back against the door for a second, then forced myself to step away, as if distance could make it less real. That was almost 2 weeks ago. I haven't opened the bedroom door since. There's no food in there, no water, no litter box, and yet the cat is still alive. Every day I hear it. It cries at random times, sometimes soft, sometimes loud, like it's trying different ways to reach me. At night, It scratches the door. At first, the scratches were occasional, frantic bursts. Now they come in slow, steady patterns, like someone working. The worst part is the meowing. It sounds like Snowball now. Not all the time, but enough. I'll be sitting on the couch trying to watch TV with the volume up, and suddenly I'll hear Snowball's exact meow from the other side of that door, the one he makes when he wants to be picked up, the one he makes when he wants his dinner 5 minutes early, the one he makes when he's bored and demands attention. My skin crawls every time, because I know it isn't him. I know it can't be him. If I let myself believe it's Snowball, even for a second, then I start thinking about the photo, about the way the apartment rewrites details like it's editing a story. And then I don't know what I'll do. Last night, it started jiggling the door handle. I've had furniture piled in front of the bedroom door since the first night. Chairs, a small table, whatever I could move. It's a pathetic barrier, really. Something you do in a panic because doing nothing feels like dying. When the handle moved, the furniture trembled slightly, like the door had been pushed from the other side with steady pressure. I sat on the couch holding my breath, staring at the door like it was a mouth. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. I've thought about leaving the apartment. I've thought about walking out with my keys and my wallet and never coming back. But all my friends and family are hours away. I can't afford to keep paying for this place and also rent another one. I could get a hotel for a few nights, maybe a week, but then what? I still have to work. I still have a lease. I still have furniture. I still have my life inside that bedroom. Clothes, important papers, everything. Even if I leave, I'll have to come back. And when I come back, I know it will be here. Whatever it is, waiting like it always has. Sometimes, when the apartment is quiet, and I can almost pretend nothing is happening, I think about her. I think about how much I miss her, and how badly I want one last conversation that isn't inside my head. I think about all the times I was distracted or tired or impatient. I think about how I didn't always show up for her the way I should have. I think about how I assumed there would be more time. I wish I could apologize. I wish I could say goodbye properly. I wish I could ask her what she wants from me now, and why it feels less like love and more like something keeping score. But more than anything, I wish I could tell her to get a place ready for me wherever she is, because I have this awful feeling that I'm going to be there soon. And if the thing in my bedroom finally gets out, I don't think I'll have a choice. Story 3, I'm a moderator on a big streaming platform. It's not glamorous work, but it pays my rent, and if you take the right jobs, it pays really well. That's the whole reason I do it. I'm not there to build community. I'm there because the highest-paying gigs usually need someone who can keep their head, while the worst parts of the internet roll past them in real time. After a while, you get numb. You learn what to look for in a single frame. You learn how fast a chat can turn into a mob. Most of it is the usual garbage. People flashing the camera, people trying to bait someone into self-harm, people throwing around racist slurs like it's a sport. You delete, you ban, you report, you de-escalate, you type the same warnings until your fingers do it without you thinking. I'd already had a couple jobs that pushed me close to quitting. One in particular had stuck with me in a way I didn't like. I'm not getting into that one right now, but it messed with my sleep for a while. I told myself I was done, that I was going to find a different kind of work, something where my brain didn't have to be a trash filter all day. But then I saw another listing with a number attached to it that made me pause. The pay was high enough that I could justify one more job. I told myself the same dumb line everyone tells themselves when they're about to do something they know is a bad idea. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So I took it. The listing was short. No branding, no company name I recognized, just a work order inside the platform's internal job board. The title said, Pre-broadcast moderation for internal live stream content. No audience interaction required. That last line was what got me. No audience meant no trolls, no random viewers trying to be edgy, no doxing threats, no chat floods. It sounded like the easiest kind of moderation work. Sit there, watch, clean up anything that violated guidelines, and go home with money in your account. This stream wasn't going to the public live. It was part of a delayed broadcast pipeline. The way they explained it during onboarding was that the show was being captured live, but it wouldn't air until later. My job was to monitor the live feed and make sure nothing that broke policy made it through. If something happened, nudity, violence, self-harm, illegal stuff, I would flag it or cut it before the delayed version ever hit an audience. Basically, I was sanitizing reality in real time. The onboarding guy sent over a simple document with rules. I've seen rules like this before, and they're usually common sense. This set was short, but weirdly specific. Do not pause, rewind, or refresh the stream. Do not take screenshots or record the screen. Do not open the chat history tab. Remove any message that appears to reference future events. That last one stood out so hard I actually reread it twice. Reference future events? What did that even mean? Most of the stuff we remove is about present behavior, harassment, threats, slurs, personal info. Future events sounded like spoilers or maybe like people planning something. I asked the onboarding guy about it. He didn't seem bothered by the question. He talked like he'd been asked it 100 times. He said sometimes test data gets injected into the chat to make sure the pipeline is working. Just remove anything predictive. Predictive. That word should have made me push harder, but I didn't. In my head, I pictured a scripted stream, like a promotional thing or a pre-recorded show pretending to be live. I figured predictive messages meant spoilers for a scripted sequence. Like, the ghost appears, the magician pulls a rabbit, that kind of thing. Maybe they didn't want anything that could ruin the experience when it aired. So I shrugged it off. I logged in at the scheduled time, and the stream loaded. It was nothing. Just a fixed camera pointed at a room. It looked like a basic apartment living room. A couch pushed against one wall, a coffee table in front of it, a door in the back leading to somewhere I couldn't see. One lamp was on, throwing a warm circle of light across the floor. The rest of the room was dim. There was no music, no talking, no visible person. The only sound was a faint hum, like a fan or an air conditioner. The chat panel was empty. At first, I thought the stream hadn't started. I checked the timestamp. It was live. I checked my connection. Fine. I checked the job timer. Running. So I sat there and watched an empty room. Minutes passed. 10, 15, 20. This is the kind of thing that messes with your brain even if nothing happens. I've watched enough weird internet videos to know how many of them start like this. An empty room, grainy lighting, the feeling that you're waiting for something you don't want to see. The longer you stare, the more your mind starts inventing movement in shadows. Your eyes start grabbing at corners. You start trying to hear patterns in the hum. Then a message appeared in the chat. Door opens soon. It didn't look like a normal message. There was no username, no avatar, just plain gray text, like a system notification, but not labeled as one. It felt exactly like the onboarding guy had described. Test data injected into chat. I hovered my mouse over it, then removed it. About 10 seconds later, the door in the room opened. Not all the way. Just enough to show a slice of darkness beyond it. Then it closed again. I sat up a little straighter. It didn't scare me, not exactly. It felt staged, like someone behind the scenes was trying to build a mood. Like a cheap found footage setup. Ooh, a door opened by itself. It was the kind of thing that would make an audience lean in and wait for the next beat. I told myself I'd just be patient. More messages appeared after that, spaced out by minutes. Every time one showed up, it described something small. I deleted them because that was the rule, and then the thing happened. Lamp turns off delete. 10 seconds later, the lamp clicked off, and the room went darker. Something moves behind couch delete. A soft shuffle sounded, and the top edge of the couch shifted slightly, like someone had pressed down on it from behind. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would get a stream banned. Just the little cues, like a haunted house attraction where the goal isn't to terrify you, it's to keep you uneasy. An hour in, my focus started slipping. You can only watch an empty room for so long before your brain starts trying to escape. I checked the clock, stretched my neck, stared at the doorway like it owed me a better explanation. A new message appeared. Door opens, I saw it. I should have deleted it right away. I didn't. Not because I was trying to be brave, I was just bored and distracted. And my hand didn't move fast enough. A few seconds passed. Nothing happened. I thought, okay, so it's not perfectly synced. It's just test messages. Then, about half a minute later, the door opened. The exact thing the message said, but delayed. My skin prickled. I leaned closer to the screen. The timing felt off from before. I couldn't remember the exact delays on the earlier ones. 10 seconds, 20 maybe? I hadn't been tracking them because I assumed it was all scripted nonsense. Now I started paying attention. I stopped deleting immediately. I began timing the gap between message and event. Not with anything fancy. Just by counting in my head, then checking the clock when I remembered to. Every single one came true. Every one. The delay wasn't perfectly consistent, but it hovered around the same range. Around 20 seconds, give or take. The message would appear, and then the room would catch up to it. That's when the thought hit me, clear and heavy. The chat wasn't reacting to the stream. It was ahead of it. And this was supposed to be pre-broadcast. Internal. No audience. So where were these messages coming from? I tried to build a normal explanation because that's what you do when something doesn't fit. You don't jump to paranormal. You jump to technical. A preloaded script, a bot, a hidden test user, a playback delay in the video feed, and a separate live feed for metadata. Something. But none of those explanations really sat right because the messages weren't labeled as test data, and they weren't coming from a user account. They were just there. I started getting irritated, the way you get when you sense someone is messing with you, but you can't prove it. I wanted to report it as a bug. I wanted to message the onboarding guy and ask him what exactly I was looking at. Then I had another thought, a stupid one. If I could grab a screenshot of the message and the door open after it, I could prove to myself it was real. I could prove it wasn't my eyes getting tricked by boredom and dim lighting. But screenshots were against the rules. So I did the next best thing. I thought about opening the chat history tab for just a second, just to see what the system was logging. I knew it was against the rules, too. But I told myself it was harmless. 2 seconds, in and out. Get confirmation, then go back to doing my job. I clicked chat history. Instead of a normal log, timestamps, usernames, moderation actions, it was just a long list of messages. No context, no names. Just plain lines, one after another, describing events. Most of them were about the room. The door opens, the lamp turns off. Something behind the couch. It was stupid, because there wasn't anything in the room. A couch, a door, a lamp. How many events could a quiet room even have? I scrolled. And then I saw a line that made my fingers go cold. Moderator closes chat history. I stared at it, not fully understanding what I was reading. My eyes ran over it again. Slower. Moderator closes chat history. I hadn't closed it. I was looking at it right then. My first thought was that it was describing what I was about to do, like a predictive placeholder. My second thought was worse, that it was describing what it wanted me to do. Another line below it. Should I? My mouth went dry. My heart didn't race. It did something more uncomfortable. It felt like it sank, like my body was trying to get heavier and smaller at the same time. Then another message. Moderator feels happy they closed chat history. That one hit me like a personal insult. Like the stream, or whoever made this, was wearing my face for a second. Like it was speaking for me. I closed chat history immediately, like I could slam a door in someone's face. When I went back to the main view, the living room feed was still there. The couch, the table, the dark door in the back. The room looked exactly the same as it had from the beginning. I told myself I'd been dumb, that it was a prank meant to test compliance, that the rules were there to see if moderators would break them, that the predictive messages were just a fancy way of checking if I'd follow instructions. It had to be something like that. My hands were shaking anyway, just a little. I tucked them under my legs to steady them. I kept watching. Then a new message appeared in the live chat. Moderator checks behind him. I stared at the line. I didn't delete it. I didn't do anything. I waited for something to happen in the stream because by now that was the pattern. Chat first, then the room catches up. But nothing happened. The living room stayed empty. 10 seconds passed. 20. 30. Another message appeared. Too late, I turned so fast I felt a sharp pain in my neck. There was nothing behind me. Of course there wasn't. My home office was the same as it always was. Desk, chair, laundry basket I kept meaning to move. The dark shape of my closet door. Nothing dramatic, nothing moving. And that was the worst part. Because when you do something like that, when you whip around because you're sure something is there, and you find nothing, your brain doesn't relax. It starts filling the space with all the things that could be there, but aren't visible. It makes the empty feel crowded. I let out a laugh that didn't sound like me. It sounded thin and forced. I turned back to my monitors and focused on the stream, like focusing harder could make this normal. That's when I saw the door in the stream room. It was open. I hadn't seen it open. There hadn't been a message warning me. It was just open now, wide enough that I could see into the space beyond. There was a hallway out there. I hadn't seen a hallway before. Not once, in all the times the door had opened and closed. Before, it had always been darkness, like the camera couldn't catch what was beyond it. Now it was a real hallway, with pale walls and a darker floor, like a passage inside the apartment. Another message appeared. It looks at the moderator, too. I felt my stomach twist. I leaned toward the screen without thinking, as if moving closer would help me see, as if distance was the issue. The hallway was empty, but the message made it feel not empty. Like there was something standing just out of the camera's view, something turned toward me instead of toward the room. Another line? It leaves the room. Slowly, something passed across the doorway. Not a clear figure, not a person. More like a shift in the light, as if something tall moved between the hallway and the room. The darkness thickened for a second, like the camera was trying to focus on a shape that didn't belong there. Then it was gone. The doorway stayed open. The hallway stayed visible. The room was still. No more chat messages appeared after that. No lamp turns on. No door closes. No movement behind couch. Nothing. Just silence. And the hum in the open door, like the stream had decided it had done enough. I kept watching because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to stand up. I didn't want to look away from the screen and give the feeling behind that too late message any room to grow in my mind. I told myself I was safe because this was just a video feed, a remote camera. Another apartment, another place. At exactly 4 hours, the system logged me out automatically. No warning, no session ending, no job complete. 1 second, I was staring at that open doorway, and the next, the platform kicked me to a blank login page. I sat there for a few seconds with my hands on the desk, listening to my own house. The normal creaks, the low sound of my fridge, the distant noise of a car outside. Everything that usually makes you feel grounded. Then I stood up and turned on every light in the room. Then the hallway light, then the kitchen. I walked through my place like I was doing a safety check, telling myself I was only doing it because my back was stiff from sitting so long. Not because I felt watched, not because I kept thinking of that line. It looks at the moderator, too. Eventually, I calmed down enough to go to bed, though I slept badly. When I woke up the next day, I tried to act like it was just a weird job with a weird test system. I tried to laugh at myself for getting spooked by text and an empty room. That night, I opened the notepad file I'd been using, the one where I'd written down the delays between messages and events. It was still there, exactly as I'd left it. My little list of notes, the numbers, the rough timing. I scrolled down to check the last entry and to make sure I hadn't imagined any of it. There was a line at the bottom that I didn't remember writing. Moderator rereads notes. For a second, I just stared at it. It looked like the same style as the messages. Plain, simple, like a description of an action, not a thought. Under that line was another. Turns around again, I felt the blood leave my face in a slow wave. My body went very still, like if I didn't move, nothing could happen. Because I understood the pattern now. First the message, then the event. And the delay wasn't long. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to give it what it wanted. I didn't want to prove it right. But my body moved anyway, like it had been instructed. I turned. My window was wide open, not cracked, not slightly shifted. Open like someone had lifted it all the way, letting in the night air. The curtain moved gently, like it had been breathing. I stood there staring at it, and the silence in my apartment felt wrong. Not loud silence, not dramatic silence. Just the kind that makes you realize you've been taking certain sounds for granted. And now they're gone. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. Nothing unusual. No one standing there. No footsteps on the stairs, no shadows in the parking lot. Just an open window that hadn't been open before. And a message on my screen that said I was going to turn around again. I shut it and locked it. Then I checked the other windows. Then I checked the front door. Then I checked the closet, which I hated doing because it made me feel ridiculous, like I was in a horror movie. I didn't find anything. But that didn't help, because the problem wasn't that there was a person in my apartment. The problem was that something had been right about me again. I sat back down at my desk and stared at that notepad line until the words blurred. That was the last moderation job I ever took. People can keep their streams. They can keep their chats. They can keep their test data. I'm not cleaning the internet anymore, not when something on the other side can learn you well enough to write you down before you move. Story 4. My friend Elliot can see ghosts. At least that's what he told me, and for most of my life I believed him. According to Elliot, we're surrounded all the time. Not in a dramatic movie way where one pale woman in a nightgown appears at the end of a hallway, but in a crowded, constant way. Dead people everywhere, standing in doorways, sitting on train seats, gathering at the edges of rooms the way people gather near a bar at a party. Elliot said most of them can't move on for some reason. They're stuck, and they know he can see them, so they drift toward him like he's a porch light. The worst part, he said, is that they don't communicate like we do. Not in English, not in any language he recognizes. Even their hand motions don't map onto anything familiar. It isn't like they point at an object or mime what they want. Their movements are sharp and layered and fast, like a sign language designed for hands that aren't made of meat. Elliot told me the gestures feel aggressive because they come with urgency. The ghosts are desperate, and when you're desperate, even pleading can look like anger. He learned early that the less of him they can see, the better. So he goes out dressed like he's trying not to be recognized. Heavy clothes even when it's warm. Big watches and bracelets like armor. Baseball caps pulled low so the brim hides his eyes. Sometimes sunglasses, sometimes a hood. He said it doesn't make him invisible to them, but it dulls whatever signal he gives off. It makes it harder for them to lock onto him. Elliot and I live near each other in Brooklyn, and he once told me something that stuck in my head more than anything else. No matter where he goes, it's crowded. He described being on an empty subway car late at night, truly empty. No people, no phones glowing, no bags on the seats. The train stalled between stations and stayed underground for almost an hour. The lights flickered. The air went stale. Most people would call that unpleasant and leave it at that. Elliot said the car filled up. Not with living people, with spirits. So many he couldn't see the seats clearly anymore. They packed around him, shoulder to shoulder, face to face, leaning in close, moving their hands, turning their heads, trying to force something through to him. He said it wasn't like being haunted by one ghost. It was like being mobbed by 100 strangers who all needed him at once, who all believed if they got close enough, he'd finally understand. And because he was trapped underground, he couldn't get away from them. He told me that was the worst moment of his life. Not the fear exactly, though there was fear, but the loneliness, being stuck and being alone, while also realizing there's no such thing as being alone. Knowing that even the emptiest train car, even the darkest tunnel, can be crowded with the unseen. Before you decide Elliot was making it up for attention, there's something important you should know. Elliot doesn't tell people. He doesn't bring it up on dates. He doesn't post about it. He doesn't build a personality around it. He doesn't make it a fun story at parties. If anything, he's the opposite. He avoids attention like it burns. The circle of people who know is small. His parents, his mom believes him a little, in the hesitant way some people believe in dreams and intuition. His dad doesn't believe him at all, and I think that's how his dad survives it. And one ex-girlfriend. Me. Elliot and I dated freshman year of high school, 2 decades ago. We were kids, really, playing at being serious. When he told me back then that he saw dead people all the time, I didn't handle it with kindness. First, I thought he was lying. Then I thought he was unstable. I'm not proud of this, but his confession was part of why I broke up with him. At the time, I told myself I was protecting myself. In reality, I was scared, and I chose the easiest kind of cruelty: disbelief. Years later, I apologized. I meant it too. I told him I'd been wrong, that I'd been a bad listener and a worse friend in that moment, and by then, I really did believe him. Not because I saw a ghost myself, not because anything was proven in a way you could show a judge, but because Elliot's life made no sense otherwise. The way he avoided crowds, the way he dressed, the way he lived like a person who needed to control every variable, the way he flinched sometimes at empty space, the way he'd show up to dinner already exhausted. There's more going on than most of us can see. Elliot just has the misfortune or the gift of deeper vision. And if it's a gift, the obvious question is, why keep it private? That question was my problem. It got into my head and set up a little office there. I work in reality TV. I've been in that world since my first internship in college. Development meetings, pitch decks, sizzle reels, casting calls, long nights of story editing. I know what sells, and more importantly, I know what can be shaped into something that sells. Elliot wasn't just a guy with a strange claim. He was a show, a whole series. I could picture the log line immediately. Elliot helps families connect with loved ones. Or he helps stuck spirits move on. Or the show is simply his day-to-day life, navigating Brooklyn while being followed by the dead. The camera could capture his reactions, his workarounds, his routines. People would be fascinated. People would cry. People would tweet about it. People would argue about whether it was real, and that argument alone would keep the ratings alive. Elliot himself would be perfect on screen. He can be intense, sure, but he's also attractive in a quiet way, smart, funny when he relaxes, and he's kind in a way that feels sincere, not performative. The audience would fall in love with him, and for once he'd have something big and important instead of a small life built around avoiding eye contact with empty air. When I finally said it out loud to him, he shut it down instantly. Absolutely not. He didn't even want to talk about it with me, and I was the person he trusted most with it. He said he wasn't interested in being famous. He said he didn't want strangers watching him. He said the whole point of his life was to keep it small enough to manage. He works from home as an audio engineer. He lifts weights in his living room. He gets everything delivered. He schedules his life so he doesn't have to stand too long in places where the dead gather. He told me calmly and firmly that he liked it that way. There was also, he mentioned once, a ghost in his apartment. It wasn't the kind of detail he shared often, but he said this one wasn't a constant problem. The spirit kept itself in a small second bathroom that Elliot never used. The place was basically a half-bath. Toilet, sink, no window. Elliot called it the other bathroom, like it was a bad roommate. One time, years ago, I dared myself to peek inside. Elliot was in the kitchen, back turned, and I crept down the short hallway and pushed the door open just enough to look. I didn't see a ghost. I saw a tiny, clean room with gorgeous blue tile on the floor and walls. No clutter, no personal stuff. Just this bright, almost luxurious tile that felt wasted in a bathroom no one used. I remember thinking what a shame it was that no one got to see it. That was the only haunting I noticed. Something beautiful sealed away. I didn't believe Elliot was happy. I never fully believed it. But I didn't push because friendship has its own rules. You don't force someone to become who you think they should be. You listen. You wait. So for years, I kept my mouth shut. I went to parties with producers and executives and network people and smiled while they asked what I was working on. I pitched other ideas instead. Dark ones. Important ones. Cults, abuse, sex trafficking, things that required hours of research that made my stomach turn and my sleep shallow. I made myself scared of the world on purpose because fear gets greenlit. And all the while, I carried the best show idea I'd ever have and refused to use it because it belonged to a person, not a concept. Then the industry changed, like it always does, brutal and fast. First there was less work. Then the work paid less. Then there were months where nothing came in at all. No matter how many emails I sent, or coffees I took, or favors I asked for. My savings shrank. My confidence went with it. When you're scared enough, you start calling things opportunities that used to feel like betrayals. So when I ran into a producer I knew at a party, someone who used to take my calls and now barely return texts, I pitched him a dozen ideas. I watched his eyes glaze. I could feel myself losing him. I could feel my career slipping away like a soap bar. And then I said Elliot's name. The producer's face changed immediately, like I'd finally said something real. "Bring him in," he said. "Thursday at 4. I suggested a coffee shop, trying to keep it casual, trying to make it sound like a low-stakes meeting and not a trap. I told myself Elliot could still say no. I told myself it would just be a conversation. Then I called Elliot. We were friends who texted, not friends who called. Calling meant something was wrong. He answered on the first ring, which should have told me he was either worried or unusually available. What I told myself, standing in my apartment with the phone pressed hard to my ear, was that Elliot needed this. That he'd be annoyed at first, but then he'd see the possibilities. He'd feel relief. He wouldn't have to hide. He could stop shrinking his world to survive. I imagined him rising to it. I imagined him becoming someone big. I imagined the love he'd shut himself off from finally finding him. I told myself I was helping. I told myself my intentions made it clean. The truth was uglier. I needed it. I needed a win. I needed to matter again. What I actually said into the phone was, I sold a show. Meet me Thursday at 3:30 to celebrate. I got to the coffee shop early. It was one of those Brooklyn places that tries to look effortless. Plants, bare wood, expensive pastries behind glass. Not too crowded. Quiet enough for a meeting. I took a table in the back where we could talk. When Elliot walked in, I saw him immediately, because he looked like he always did when he left his apartment. Heavy jacket, cap pulled low, big watch, shoulders slightly hunched like he was trying to make himself smaller. He paused just inside the door, and his eyes widened as he scanned the room. He looked like someone who'd walked into danger. For a second, a mean thought flashed through me. He's overdoing it. It was such a quick thought, I almost didn't notice it. But it landed hard anyway. Because it wasn't just annoyance. It was doubt. It was my old self waking up. The version of me that didn't believe him and didn't want to. Then Elliot's gaze locked onto mine, and something about the timing made my skin prickle. It was like he'd waited to react until he knew I could see him react. For one horrible second, it looked like a performance. I sat there with my hands wrapped around my coffee cup and felt my stomach tighten. Had I ever fully stopped doubting him? No. I'd believed him the way you believe someone you love because you don't want to lose them. Not the way you believe the sky is blue. What if he'd been acting for 20 years? What if he'd built his whole life around a lie? What if he really was sick, and I'd been enabling it because it made a better story? I tried to push the thoughts away, because right behind Elliot, walking in like he owned the place, was the producer. He'd arrived early, too. They reached my table at the same time, Elliot slightly in front like a shield, and the producer smiling like a man who thought he'd just found gold. You must be Elliot, the producer said. I've heard so much about you. Elliot's eyes went cold. He stared at the producer, then at me. The force of that glare made me shrink in my chair. I'd seen Elliot angry before, but not like this. This was betrayal, pure and sharp. The producer shifted uncomfortably, trying to catch my eye like I'd fix it. I felt myself slipping, right then, toward losing everything. My friendship and whatever scraps of my career were left. I reached across the table and grabbed Elliot's hand. It's a show about you, I said quickly. But hear me out. We do it together. You control the vision. You decide the limits. We make it safe. Whatever you're comfortable with, that's what we do. Elliot didn't squeeze back. His hand stayed limp, like he wasn't really there. He believes you, I added, nodding at the producer. The producer gave a reluctant, careful nod like he didn't want to overpromise, but he was willing to play along. You're safe, I told Elliot. This could be good. It could help people. Elliot pulled his hand away. He looked at the producer, and his voice was calm in a way that scared me more than yelling. "I'm sorry she wasted your time," he said. "But I can't see ghosts." The words hit like a slap. Elliot glanced at me, and his mouth twisted into something almost like a smile, but empty. "That was a lie I told her as a kid, so she'd break up with me," he said. "And I thought it was hilarious to keep it going." Then he turned and walked out. The producer looked at me with such deep pity I wanted to crawl under the table. I could practically hear what he was thinking. Desperate girl, sad story, embarrassing. I didn't even know what to say. There was nothing to say. I sat there until the producer left, my coffee going cold, my face burning. For weeks after that, nothing moved forward. No job offers, no new projects. And no Elliot. I didn't text him. He didn't text me. At first, I felt numb. Then I got angry. The more I replayed the coffee shop scene, the more convinced I became that he really had been lying all along. Of course he had. There had never been proof. Everything he described was built in a way that couldn't be checked. If a place had a history, any ghost he claimed to see could be blamed on that. If he said they spoke a language no one understood, how convenient. If he dressed like a man in hiding, how dramatic. I told myself I'd been tricked for 20 years by someone who enjoyed watching me believe him. And if I'm honest, part of my anger was embarrassment. I hated how much I'd built my image of him on something I couldn't prove. I hated that I'd defended him in my own head, that I'd quietly thought other people were shallow for not understanding him. I hated that I'd made him special. A month passed like that, with silence between us like a wall. Then Elliot texted. He said he was sorry. He said the truth was complicated. He said I should come over so he could explain it in person. The relief that rushed through me was so strong it made me dizzy. It was the kind of relief you feel when you realize you've been holding your breath for weeks. It also made me realize how guilty I'd been. Not just about the show pitch, but about everything. About high school. About not believing him. About the ways I'd used him in my head even when I was trying not to. I texted back that I'd be right there. When I got to Elliot's apartment, I almost didn't recognize it. It was filthy. Not just messy, not just single guy clutter, but neglected. Dirty dishes stacked everywhere. Trash that should have been taken out days ago. A smell of unwashed laundry and spoiled food that hit me in the face the moment the door opened. Elliot looked hollow. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin dull, his shoulders slumped like he'd been folded up for weeks. He told me he'd felt so ashamed about lying to me for so long that it triggered a depressive episode. He said he'd barely been eating, barely sleeping, barely moving. Only now was he starting to surface. I didn't lecture him. I didn't say I told you so. I went straight into caretaker mode because that's what I do when I'm scared and sad. I sat him down on the couch with a glass of water, put on some music to soften the silence, and started washing dishes. I washed every plate, every cup, every fork I could find, like clean surfaces could fix what was broken. When I came out of the kitchen, Elliot was still on the couch, staring at the wall. The water was untouched. I sat beside him, close enough to be comforting, not close enough to feel trapped. "Why did you lie about seeing ghosts?" I asked quietly. "Was it really to laugh at me?" "No," he said. His voice sounded scraped raw. "I wanted you to think I was interesting." He swallowed like it hurt. "Even now," he went on, "it's all you ever wanted to talk about. Would you want my friendship? without the ghosts? Yes, I said immediately. I care about you. I always have. He blinked slowly, and then he said it like he'd been holding it in for years. I'm in love with you. I managed to keep my face still. I even kept a faint smile in place because I didn't know what else to do with my mouth. Inside, something in me recoiled, not because he was disgusting, not because it was an insult, but because it was heavy. It was too much to carry in that moment, in that apartment, with the air sour and the dishes still drying and his eyes too open. I felt a strong, selfish need to leave, to step into the hallway, breathe clean air, and never come back. But I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to abandon him when he was fragile. I didn't want to repeat who I'd been at 15. So I kept my voice gentle. That is so flattering, I said, and I hated how fake it sounded, even though I meant the kindness. But I love you as a friend. Elliot's face fell. He didn't hide it. The disappointment was immediate, like someone had pulled a support out from under him. Heat rushed up my neck. I needed an excuse to stand, to break the moment, to give him room and give myself air. I'm going to the bathroom, I said, getting up too fast. The room swayed for a second. Elliot's cheeks reddened. Toilet's clogged in the main bathroom, he said. You have to use the other one. The other bathroom. The one he used to call his roommate's room. The one with the beautiful blue tile. A lie, I reminded myself. A weird, long-running lie, but not dangerous. Just sad. Not a problem, I said. I kept my tone light, like this was normal. As I walked down the hall, I called back over my shoulder, trying to patch the moment behind me with something easy. Let's watch a movie. Whatever you want. You mind if it's scary? Elliot asked. Something about the way he said it made me stop for a second. I looked back. He was still sitting there, shoulders rounded, eyes shiny, just sad and lonely and familiar. My oldest friend. I pushed down the uneasy feeling because it felt unkind to distrust him further. Yeah, I said. That's fine. I went into the second bathroom and locked the door out of habit. The room was exactly as I remembered. Tight space, sink and toilet, blue tile that looked expensive and clean. But this time there was nothing else. No hand soap, no towel, no toilet paper. The counter was bare, the towel rack empty. It was like a room set up for no one. I rinsed my hands anyway, then dried them on my jeans, already planning what I'd say when I got out. I couldn't stay. I needed to leave, kindly but firmly. I started drafting excuses. I don't feel well. I have an early morning. I forgot I promised someone a call. Anything. I reached for the doorknob. It wouldn't turn. At first I thought I'd locked it wrong, that simple bathroom lock panic. I jiggled it again, harder, nothing. Hey, Elliot, I called, trying to sound casual even though my voice lifted at the end. I think I'm stuck. The music in the living room had stopped. The sudden quiet made my pulse jump. Maybe he didn't hear me. Maybe he'd started looking for a movie. So I raised my voice. Elliot? Hello? Can you help me, please? A pause. Then, from the other side of the door, close enough that I could imagine his mouth near the wood, Elliot whispered, I was never lying. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like falling. I stepped back, my heel hitting tile. Then the bathroom light clicked off. I gasped. There were no windows, no glow from outside. The darkness was immediate and complete, like someone had thrown a blanket over my head. "Let me out right now," I screamed. "It's your fault I'm like this," Elliot said, his voice steady on the other side. "You proved I can never tell a woman the truth about my life." "Listen," I said, forcing my words out carefully, trying to sound reasonable because reason felt like the only weapon I had. "If I hurt you, I'm sorry, but you'll have to let me out." That's when I heard it. A sound from inside the room with me. A thin wail of pain, too high-pitched to be human. It slid through the dark like a blade. It didn't come from the door. It didn't come from the hallway. It was in here. My hands flew out in front of me, searching for the sink, for the wall, for anything solid to orient myself. The tile was cold under my fingertips. "What you hear is audio I designed," Elliot said. "Closest I can get to what the ghosts sound like when they haunt me." The wailing continued, rising and falling in a rhythm that didn't feel like breath. Under it, another noise started, thumping, heavy and dull, like something being dropped downstairs over and over. The combination made my teeth hurt. "You were always so curious what it felt like," Elliot went on. "Now you get to feel it too." I sank down until my back hit the door, trying to make myself small. I noticed the faint sliver of light on the floor under the door, coming from the living room. I stared at it like it was the last star in the sky. "The audio runs for an hour," Elliot said. "Same amount of time I was stuck underground on the subway." My mouth went dry. "Elliot, please, say hi to my roommate for me," he whispered. Then the sliver of light vanished. He'd turned off the lights in the rest of the apartment. The darkness became total. Not even that faint line to prove there was a world outside the room. Just me, sealed in black. My panic spiked so hard I thought I might pass out. I clamped my eyes shut, then covered them with my hands as if I could press the darkness away. It didn't help much, but it gave my body something to do besides shake. I heard Elliot's footsteps moving away, slow and unhurried, like he'd done this in his head 100 times. The wailing grew louder. The thumps grew closer, or maybe that was my mind trying to locate danger. The sounds filled the room until it felt like the tile was vibrating. And then, with my eyes still covered, I felt it. A presence. Not a sound. Not a movement I could see. Just the sudden certainty that someone else was in there with me, close enough that the air changed. It felt like a person had stepped into my personal space without making a footstep, right beside me. Exactly where someone would stand if they were at the sink, facing the mirror. I screamed, my back pressed hard to the door. I kept my hands over my eyes like a child because I couldn't handle seeing whatever was there, even though I couldn't see anything anyway. "Please don't hurt me," I whispered. The words came out small. The wailing from the speakers rose in response, like it had heard me. I lowered my hands, but kept my eyes shut, trembling, trying to convince myself it was panic, that a locked room can make your brain manufacture anything. And with my eyes closed, I could see him. Not like normal sight. More like the idea of a person burned into the dark. Like seeing someone through frosted glass. Like looking at a figure in the corner of your vision, even though you're facing straight at it. He was right there, close enough to touch. But his edges weren't stable. I couldn't tell his age or his clothes. I couldn't even fully tell the shape of his face. My eyes flew open and I screamed again, The moment my eyes opened, the figure vanished, and I was back to ordinary darkness. I squeezed my eyes shut again without meaning to, and he returned. Open, gone, closed, there. I tested it like a sick game, my breath coming in short, painful pulls. Every time my eyes closed, the ghost was present. Clearer. Every time they opened, he disappeared and left me alone with sound and black air. I tried to keep my eyes open. I tried hard. I forced my eyelids wide and stared into nothing until my eyes watered. But the human body has limits, and fear makes you blink. Eventually, my eyes closed again, and the ghost was there, and he was looking at me the way a person looks at another person when they finally find someone who can see them. This time, his face sharpened. The smudged edges pulled into focus as if my attention was a lens. He was ageless in a way I can't describe. Not young, not old. Smooth skin that seemed to hold light even in darkness. Calm eyes. Kind, almost curious. The wailing from the speakers continued, but it started to feel less like noise and more like a crude imitation of something real. Like a recorded version of an emotion. The ghost made a sound. His mouth didn't move. The sound came from inside me, vibrating up through my chest as if my bones were the speaker. I couldn't translate it into words, but I felt the shape of it. And the strangest part was this. The ghost didn't feel threatening. The fact that he existed was terrifying. The reality of him, the impossible closeness, the way my senses betrayed me. Those things were horror, but he himself wasn't. I realized in that locked, dark bathroom that I'd wanted proof for most of my life. I'd wanted to know if Elliot's world was real. I'd wanted to see what he saw. Some part of me had wanted it the way people want to stare at a car wreck, unable to look away. Now I had it, and it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like standing in front of a door you begged to be open, and then finding out the room behind it changes you. My fear loosened, not completely, but enough that I could think. "What do you want?" I whispered. And the answer didn't arrive as a sentence. It arrived as understanding. It poured into me like warm water, gratitude so intense it made my throat ache, relief at being perceived, joy at being acknowledged, at being more than a stuck impression in a forgotten room. I felt for a flickering moment what it meant to have a body, to occupy space, to be heavy, to have skin and breath and time that moves forward in a straight line. I also felt how time worked for him, slippery and strange. How years in a bathroom could fold into nothing. How waiting wasn't the same for him as it was for me. And under everything, the simplest thing, delight. He was delighted that I could see him. Delighted that I cared to. The wailing from Elliot's speakers kept going, but it lost its grip on me. The thumping noise faded into the background. My breathing slowed. The bathroom didn't feel empty or full anymore. It felt shared. The ghost didn't press me. He didn't reach for me. He just stood there, where he always stood, by the sink, facing the mirror that wasn't really a mirror in the dark. Like this was his spot. Like this was his only habit. And suddenly I understood something else, too. Something so simple. It made me feel foolish. Hauntings weren't always about rage, or unfinished business, or revenge. Maybe they weren't even about the location. Maybe they were about contact, about glimpsing the living world the way you might stand outside a bright window on a cold night. Not trying to get inside, just wanting to see the warmth. All he wanted, I felt, was a ride on this plane again, or at least the nearest thing to it. A moment of sensation, even secondhand. A wave hello from someone who could wave back. In the dark, my mouth trembled into a smile. I lifted my hand, palm out, and waved at the empty air where I knew he stood. And in a way that didn't involve muscles or sound, he waved back. Story 5. I saw God, and God saw me. Or maybe I didn't see anything at all, and my mind just made a shape out of fear. Lately, I don't trust the simplest facts. I don't know if I'm alive. I don't know if these words are really mine, or if something else is using my thoughts the way a person uses a tool and calling it my voice. Even the place I'm sitting in right now, this cave, the cold walls, the damp smell, the silence pressing on my ears, might only exist because I'm here to notice it. If I stopped looking, maybe it would stop being real. I used to think a man was something solid, a body, a name, a history, a family. But I've learned you can be reduced to almost nothing. A single thought that shows up, hangs around for a moment, and then disappears without proof it was ever there. Like a spark in the dark. The worst part is that it didn't feel much more real back home. My life before all this already felt like a dream. Not a good one, not even a bad one, just distant and unfinished, like I was watching it through glass. I'd go through the motions, talk, work, sleep, wake up, and still feel like I wasn't fully inside my own days. And then those words started coming back to me. Not once, not twice, again and again, like something tapping on the same spot until it breaks through. Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook, or snare his tongue with a line which you lower? Can you put a reed through his nose, or pierce his jaw with a hook? I didn't remember ever reading them, I'm sure I hadn't. But they came to me in a dream and didn't leave. They followed me through waking life the way a song gets stuck in your head, except it didn't feel like a song. It felt like a message, or a test. It was the 23rd of... I can't remember the month anymore. The date stayed sharp and clean, but the month slipped away like someone wiped it on purpose. My daughter woke me up that morning. I remember how heavy my body felt. The way deep sleep makes you feel like you're crawling out of mud. I hadn't been home in months. I work on an oil rig, far out at sea, far from land, and far from anything that feels normal. Most of my life is spent away, but this time had been the longest stretch yet, and I'd felt it in my bones even before I stepped through my own front door. She was happy to see me. That's one of the only parts of my memory that still feels clean and true. Her face hovered over mine, eyes wide, bright with that kind of excitement kids get when something they wanted finally happens. For a second, I just stared, because I'd been gone long enough that I'd started forgetting the small details. The softness of her cheeks, the exact shape of her mouth when she smiled, the way her hair fell across her forehead. Aisha, I said. And even saying her name felt like remembering something I was scared to lose. She started talking right away, words tumbling out. School, friends, little dramas that mattered to her like they were world news. Then she told me about her 8th birthday and how she thought nobody would come. How she waited and waited, looking out the window. And then her friends showed up after all. They brought gifts. They ate cake. She said it was the happiest day ever, and the way she said it made me feel guilty for not being there. Not guilty in a dramatic way, guilty in a quiet, heavy way that sat behind my ribs. That's when I remembered the gift I'd brought. A few days before, I'd sent her a photo from the rig, the ocean on one of the rare calm days, when the water looked so smooth and blue it didn't seem real, like a piece of sky had fallen and settled into the world. Now I reached for my backpack and pulled out a small box wrapped in pink paper with white polka dots. I'd picked that paper on purpose because I knew she'd like it. She didn't even wait for me to hand it to her properly. She tore into it with both hands, ripping the paper so fast it crumpled and scattered. Inside was a small red plastic case. I watched her open it, and for the first time in a while I felt something like peace. It's a simple feeling, watching your kid's face when they're about to see something they want. She opened the case more slowly than she'd opened the wrapping, like she understood the difference between paper and what mattered. When she lifted the pearl into her palm, it caught the light in a way that made my skin tighten. It wasn't just pretty. It looked wrong, like it held the light instead of reflecting it. I found this when I was on the boat, I told her. Even as I said it, the memory felt off. I don't remember finding it. I don't remember where exactly I picked it up, or why I noticed it, or why I thought to keep it. Out there, in the middle of nowhere, there shouldn't have been anything like that waiting for me. But somehow I came home with a pearl. The thought slipped away before I could hold it. Aisha launched herself into my arms so hard it knocked the air out of me. She laughed and said she loved me, and her happiness felt like a warm weight. Then she pulled away, still clutching the pearl, and sprinted down the stairs to show her mother like she couldn't stand to keep good news to herself. That night, we ate pizza, the same place we always ordered from. Aisha and Myra loved it. I'd never liked it much, not even when I was younger, but I ate it anyway. I ate it because I'd been away, and because watching them eat and talk made it feel like I was back in the right world for a little while. I couldn't remember when I started hating pizza. It was such a small detail, but it bothered me. Like pieces of my life had holes in them. Later, once some of the fatigue wore off, we went to the supermarket to stock up on groceries. Bright lights, neat aisles, that quiet refrigerator hum. You stop noticing until you're tired enough. It was ordinary in a way I needed. As soon as we walked in, Aisha ran ahead to grab her cereal, disappearing around a corner like the store was her own playground. Myra hung back with me and asked if there was anything specific I wanted. She tried to sound casual, but I could hear the relief in her voice that I was there beside her again. I wandered down an aisle, not really hunting for anything. I just liked being somewhere normal, somewhere that didn't smell like metal and salt, somewhere that didn't move under your feet. Then I stopped. In the corner near the end of the aisle, a bucket sat on the floor. A plain plastic bucket filled with water like a worker had been cleaning and got pulled away. No mop nearby, no caution sign, just the bucket. The water rippled. Not the little surface tremble you'd get if someone walked past and the floor shook. There was no one near it, no carts rolling by, no kids running. The water moved like something inside it had breathed. I stared at it longer than made sense. I couldn't look away. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even clearly dangerous. It was just wrong in a way that grabbed my attention and refused to let go. Then those words rose in my head again. But now they came with others, like a second voice sliding in behind the first. Behold, the hope of a man is false. He is laid low even at the sight of him. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. Who then is he who can stand before me? I didn't remember learning those lines. I didn't even think I knew where they were from, but I knew they mattered. The voice carrying them didn't feel like my own inner voice. It felt like something speaking through a crack in me. Then I heard something else. Words that weren't English. Not even words exactly. More like sounds trying to become words and failing. Something old and wet and heavy, like language dragged through deep water. I felt pressure inside my skull, a slow dragging behind my eyes, syllables folding over each other, breaking before they formed, a rhythm like distant drums under the ocean. Dreams began to press at the edge of my mind, not dreams as in imagination, but dreams that felt like memories that didn't belong to me. And then one clear line surfaced, so crisp it made my stomach turn. In his house at Relier, dead weights dreaming. A small hand slipped into mine. Aisha had come back and found me just standing there. The moment she touched me, my body reacted like I'd been holding my breath underwater. I coughed hard once, then again, like I'd just surfaced after being too deep. My lungs burned. I sucked air in fast and sharp, and it still felt like not enough. Aisha stared up at me, eyes wide, worried now. "I'm fine," I told her, forcing a small smile. "Just tired. Haven't rested properly yet." It sounded like an excuse the second it left my mouth. I didn't believe it. I didn't know what I believed. We went home after shopping. Everything took longer than it should have. I kept drifting in and out of focus, like my mind was lagging behind my body. But eventually we ate dinner, and Myra put on a movie she'd wanted to watch. Aisha fell asleep on the couch halfway through, her head tipped to one side, the TV flickering across her face. I carried her upstairs and tucked her into bed. I stood there for a while looking at her, trying to memorize her again, like my memory was something I could train through force. When I came back downstairs, I laid my head in Myra's lap. It's strange what you forget when you're away. Not just faces, but physical comfort, the softness of skin, the steady warmth of another person beside you. Myra's fingers moved through my hair, and for a moment I felt like I could breathe normally again. And still, even then, it all felt slightly distant, like I was remembering a scene rather than living it. Maybe I'd been away too long. Maybe the sea had taken more from me than time. Maybe it had rubbed parts of me away the way waves wear down stone. Slowly, without anyone noticing until the shape is different. Myra leaned closer. At first her face was turned slightly away, like she was deciding something. I felt her breath on my cheek. Her long black hair fell around my face and neck, brushing my skin softly. Then she kissed me. I'd missed her. I'd missed this. Not just sex. The quiet promise inside it, the feeling that you belong somewhere and to someone. I kissed her back, and for a while the world narrowed down to her mouth and her hands and the warmth of her body moving against mine. I sat up and she followed. We didn't want to break away. I eased her back onto the couch, slow at first, and unbuttoned her shirt. She wore a red bra underneath, and for a moment I just looked at her, like I needed to confirm she was real and I was real and the room around us was real. Then I unclasped it and touched her, the warmth and softness grounding me in a way nothing else had since I came home. She unbuttoned my pants. pulling me closer. There was nothing shy about it. It felt like we were trying to close the distance that months apart had carved into us. Her skin against mine felt like an anchor. When I entered her, she let out a soft sound, and something inside me unclenched. For the first time since I'd returned, nothing felt far away. Nothing felt borrowed. Nothing felt like it would vanish if I tried to hold it. This was real. Her moans rose and fell with mine. The couch creaked under our movement. The room was dim, the air warm. Myra held on to me tightly, and I held on to her like I could keep my life from slipping away just by gripping it hard enough. Then pleasure surged, and with it came something else, something deeper, something that didn't belong in a living room, something that insisted on being felt through me. My eyes rolled back, and it was like I got pulled downward, not into sleep, not into imagination, but into an ocean that wasn't any ocean I'd ever seen. I was beneath a vast, ancient water, black and endless. I wasn't swimming. I didn't even have a body the way I understood bodies. I was awareness looking out from somewhere far below myself. When I surfaced, I wasn't alone. Thousands of shapes rose with me. Countless. They had no faces I could make sense of, no clear edges, nothing my mind could hold on to. And yet they screamed. Not like animals. Not like monsters from movies. Like people. Like something once human that remembered what it had lost. All of us were gasping for air, all of us desperate, pulling at the surface like drowning was the only thing we knew anymore. The water began to rise. I tried to scream, but my throat didn't work. My mouth didn't work. It was like I was trapped inside a body that wasn't listening. Panic clawed at me, but even panic felt distant, muted, like I was watching myself drown from far away. I looked down, trying to understand, and then I realized the water wasn't rising. We were. A massive hand was lifting us. An impossibly huge hand, so big it made the screaming bodies look like grains of sand. It lifted us up from the depths like we were nothing. Those verses thundered inside my head again, close and sharp. On earth, there is nothing like him, which is made without fear. He beholds every high thing. He is king over all the children of pride. The voice speaking them wasn't the same as before. It sounded like my mother. That broke something in me. For a second, the ocean faded. The hand faded. The screaming faded. And I was pulled into old memories. I was never a religious man. I never believed the way my mother believed. But she had faith like a solid object. As a kid, I used to think her certainty could protect me. She'd sit beside me sometimes and tell me stories from the Bible like they were family history. Creation, floods, judgment. A God that wasn't soft or gentle, but huge and final. Sometimes she would recite verses while resting her hand on my head, not in a creepy way, in a protective way, like she was building a wall around me out of words. There was one part she always returned to, the creature in the deep. Can you draw out Leviathan with a hook? Can you put a rope in his nose or pierce his jaw with a hook? I never understood why she lingered there. To me, it was just strange poetry, a monster story in the middle of a holy book. But now the words didn't sound like a lesson. They sounded like a warning I'd misplaced. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. The voice wasn't just remembering, it was reminding me, like someone was pressing my face toward something and saying, "Look, you were told." And then those memories began to warp. My mother's voice stretched and bent. The warmth in it rotted into something older, colder. Meaning slipped off the words like wet skin. The familiar became unfamiliar without changing shape, which is the worst kind of change. Then I saw it. Not in front of me, not behind me, inside the act of seeing itself. Eyes, not 2, not 10, not 1,000. They weren't countable. They opened in places where thought should have ended. They weren't looking at me like a person looks at another person. They were looking through me, past the idea of me like I was a thin surface stretched over something that mattered more. And I understood, in a way that didn't involve language, that my memories didn't belong to me anymore. I could feel them being touched, folded, rearranged. My mother's voice became a tool in someone else's mouth. My daughter's smile became a shape that could be moved. My love for Myra became something that could be used like bait. Every fragment I tried to hold slipped away, like trying to remember a dream while someone actively rewrites it. Understanding became impossible. And then something else took its place. A knowing without form. A presence that didn't exist in the darkness, but existed as the condition that allowed darkness to be. Then pain arrived. Not sharp and quick. Not the kind you can grit your teeth through. It was absolute. It began in my chest and expanded outward like something vast had pressed against me from the inside, testing the limits of what a human body could hold. My lungs collapsed, not emptied but denied, like breathing had been turned off in the rules of reality. Air left me in one violent exhale. Nothing came back in. I tried to inhale, and there was no mechanism left for it. No instinct, no rhythm, no body that remembered how to keep itself alive. Only the certainty that something immeasurable had reached into the small, fragile space I called myself and found it insufficient. My hand rose, grasping at nothing, reaching for anything that still felt like mine. A name, a face, a voice, anything that meant I existed. There was nothing to hold. My eyes rolled back. Darkness swallowed everything, and I woke up. I was in my bed, soaked in sweat, dragging air into my lungs like I'd been yanked out of deep water. My heart hammered. My chest hurt. My throat felt raw. I was home. Myra lay beside me asleep, her breathing slow and calm. Like the world hadn't cracked open at all. Like there had been no ocean, no hand, no eyes. For days after that, I felt normal. No dreams, no voices, no sudden verses rising up at odd moments. I started to convince myself it had been stress, exhaustion, a mind trying to process months of isolation on the rig. People underestimate what long stretches at sea can do to you. The ocean isn't just a place, it's pressure. Days turned into weeks, and my leave ran out the way it always does. Quietly, like a countdown you don't want to watch. It was my last day at home before I had to go back. That morning, Myra came downstairs and wrapped her arms around me. She didn't say anything right away. She held on tighter than usual, like she was trying to keep me in place. Then she pulled back and told me she was pregnant. For a moment, I didn't understand what she'd said. The words hovered in the air like they belonged to someone else. Then they dropped into me, and my confusion turned into something lighter. Happiness. Real happiness. I laughed, and it sounded strange in my own ears, like I'd forgotten how to do it. I pulled her close. I thought of Aisha still asleep upstairs, and the idea of leaving suddenly felt heavier than it ever had. I wanted to see my daughter's face. I wanted to hold that face in my mind the way you hold a photograph, sharp and safe. Myra took my hand and led me upstairs to the bathroom. She ran the tub, warm water, soap, steam rising and fogging the mirror. The small, normal sounds of a home. Pipes, water hitting porcelain. The quiet hush of the fan. It should have been comforting. We stepped in together, the heat settling into my skin, loosening a tension I didn't realize I'd been carrying. Myra moved carefully, then sat down on my lap with her back against my chest. She leaned into me like she belonged there. I wrapped my arms around her and held her belly gently, thinking about the life inside her, thinking about how thin the line was between ordinary life and whatever I'd felt in that dream. For once, nothing felt distant. Then Myra spoke, quiet and flat, like she'd been holding the words all day. "You're going to leave us again." I blinked. "What?" "You will leave us alone." Her hands moved over her stomach like she wasn't fully aware she was doing it. "We wanted you to stay, but you always choose the sea." I started. She cut me off. Before I could even understand what was happening, her hands pushed my face beneath the water. At first, I thought it was a joke, a quick dunk, a playful moment. But the grip didn't loosen. The warm water turned cold so fast it didn't make sense, like the heat was stolen out of it in a blink. I thrashed, trying to lift my head, but her weight pinned me down. Her hands locked around my neck. My lungs burned. The water pressed into my nose and mouth. I tried to look up at her through the distorted surface. I couldn't see her face clearly. Or maybe I could, and it just didn't register as her. Her face was there, but it didn't feel like it belonged to her anymore. Like I was looking at a version of Myra that had been stretched thin over something else. Something wearing her the way a person wears a mask. The tub felt deeper than it should have. The cold felt older than cold. The water felt like the ocean, not a bath. I was drowning. And the worst part was that I knew the feeling. I had felt it before. That helplessness, that certainty that my body didn't belong to me, like I'd slipped into someone else's dream and couldn't wake up. The light above the tub fractured, then disappeared. Darkness closed in. And then, again, I woke up. I wasn't in my house. I was on a beach, coughing and sucking air like I'd been dragged out of deep water. Sand stuck to my face and hands. My throat burned. My chest hurt like I'd been punched. Around me were pieces of a shipwreck, splintered boards, twisted metal. Debris scattered like the ocean had chewed something up and spit it onto land. It didn't feel like a dream. Not in the way dreams feel soft at the edges. This felt sharp, cold, real. I didn't stop to think. I didn't question how I got there, because the question was too big to hold. I just moved. I gathered what I could carry. Wood, scraps, anything that looked useful. The wind cut through me like it wanted to peel me open. The sand under my feet was black, darker than it should have been, swallowing what little light there was. And the night that came after was colder than anything I'd ever known, colder than the deepest water. I waited for days, watching the horizon, for a ship, a plane, a sign that the world still worked the way it was supposed to. Nothing came, no voices, no engines, no distant lights. That's why I started writing. I found something I could mark on, and I wrote like leaving words behind could prove I existed. I want someone to find this. I want these sentences to make it to another mind. I want Myra to know what happened to me, if she's real, and if I'm real, and if home was ever more than a picture inside my head. I want the world to know that Arthur Renford was alive. I don't know who will find this, or if anyone ever will. But if there is any mercy in whatever runs this place, let these words survive, even if I don't. Let them reach my wife. Let them reach my daughter. Let them do something more than dissolve. When I couldn't wait anymore, when hunger and cold and loneliness had thinned me down to a single, stubborn piece of will, I walked toward the ocean. The waves moved slowly, almost patiently, as if they'd been expecting me, as if they knew I would come back to them. Each step felt heavier. My body was worn down. My strength was running out. But the ocean didn't care. It waited, steady and sure. I stepped into the water. It rose around my legs, my waist, my chest. The moment it touched me, that old dread returned. Not as a memory, but as a physical thing. The same suffocating darkness. The same sense of being pulled into something too large to name. The same feeling of hands around my neck, even though there were no hands. I was in the ocean again. I was drowning again. The voice came back. The eyes followed. And as I sank deeper, a thought formed in me, quiet at first, then impossible to ignore. What if none of it was real? Not my life, not my house, not Myra, not Aisha. What if they were only fragments placed inside me, memories arranged like furniture, to make me believe I was human? I don't know why I thought that. I only know that something in the deep made it feel true. As I descended, I saw it. A shape so vast my mind refused to hold it together. It was suspended in the darkness, not moving like a creature moves, but existing like a fact. Like a law. Around me, countless others drifted downward too, bodies falling without struggle, as if they'd already accepted it. As if they'd been doing this for a very long time. I wondered if this was also a dream. If I would wake up again somewhere else, somewhere familiar. I found myself wishing for only two endings. Either I sink completely, and it finally ends, or I open my eyes beside Myra. So I closed my eyes and reached for the one memory I promised myself I would never lose. The one thing I kept telling myself I would hold on to no matter what happened. Her face. But when I reached for it, there was nothing there. No image, no certainty. Not even the outline. I couldn't remember her face. And in that moment, I understood what the ocean had taken from me. Not my life, not my body, my proof, the last piece that said I belonged to anyone, anywhere. I couldn't remember her face.